In today's episode of Weltengeist, we're talking about a culture that we briefly touched on but haven't yet mentioned by name, the Hugarki. They are the victims to the raids in the steppe and often engage in fierce battles with the tribes of the pugnacious Tanakar, which they rarely win. But what the Renan do not know is that behind the dense forests beyond the western steppe, the real realm of the Hugarki stretches. Thus, the Hugarki benefit from flourishing trade routes with the Moz, which distribute the Hugarki's bountiful harvests to the Nivurian Empire and other peoples to the south. In the eastern part, the Tanakar of the Renan attack the poorest and smallest villages, stealing food, clothing, and important resources. And every year, the Renan invade further inland, taking even more from the Hugarki. As if this wasn't tragic enough, there are the mysterious Gaiari people who are said to live in floating cities and also to have invented kinetics. These people demand large tributes from the Hugarki in the form of food, clothing, resources, and even human slaves. In today's video, you'll learn how the Hugarki live and deal with this situation. Socio-economics and political situation. The Hugarki are not homogeneous people but consist of many tribes, clans, and extended families, all of varying sizes, similar to their eastern neighbors, the Renan from the steppe. However, as the name suggests, these people can be divided into two cultural groups: the Hugri, who live in the east of the empire and whose settlements extend into the Renan steppe. On the other side, in the west of the empire, the Arkis provide full bellies and smiling faces by tilling their weatherproof fields. Both people are united by their attachment to nature and the forests, which are considered a divine symbol and revered throughout the empire. The high priesthood is arranged like a decentralized government, pronouncing sacred laws in the name of their beliefs. The ability to use what the Hugarian culture calls true sight is what allows a person to be considered a member of this priesthood. In other parts of the world, this true sight is known as the kinetic eye. This makes it possible for the highest and most capable priests to glimpse the kinetic essence of the world and enter a new sphere of consciousness, which the Hugarki call the truth. This transition happens similarly to something the Renan do, in a kind of trance which is induced in the Hugarki by certain types of mushrooms and herbs. In this trance state, the priests are called wanderers, and they dive into the kinetic essence of the world. Here they search for kinetic energies, the spirits of nature, ancestors, and anything else that waits behind the curtain of the physical world. Every larger village has at least one envoy who handles local administration on behalf of the true essence. Only in larger cities, however, are the wanderers, who are the supreme authority of this priestly government. Because of the true sight, the priests with this ability are also used within the scrambled, sparse, and poorly organized army. For the Hugarki are robbed of their precious food and resources, such as wood and metal, by the Renan every summer in the east. The prospect of resistance is regarded as chanceless. So recently, many Hugarki have fled into the deep forests in the empire and are looking for a new home there. As if that were not bad enough, the Hugarki people in the east are being thinned out by the Gaiari, that have been driving the Hugarki into slavery and, according to rumors, not too rarely sell them to other peoples on the other side of the Great Eastern Sea. Little is known about these Gaiari, as no one makes it back, and one can only trust scout reports of flying cities and masters of kinetics that would make even the golden Navuri pale in shame. They are a people feared and respected even by the warriors of the Moz. The realm of the Hugarki is thus taken in the pincers, which have recently worsened because of the increasing resistance of the Hugarki. It seems the Gaiari have held back in the past, and the attacks of the Renan are currently increasing in their brutality and frequency as well. A development that could lead to the militarization and further unification of the empire, and thus soon cause the birth of another emerging empire, as if the Hugarki managed to transform their natural resources into useful technology and a corresponding military force. The first step is the recently created trade route through the Moz Mountains, through which the precious food is delivered to the Navurian Empire in exchange for knowledge, technology, and weapons. Flora and Fauna. I had already mentioned it. The breadbasket of the empire sits around Arki, a city surrounded by fields and rivers. Fields with grain and fruit that can withstand the cold weather, a gift of the true essence, as the Hugarki believe. 3 of the best-known foods are the hajari fruit, a shrub plant that grows on the muddy banks of forest rivers, the huhura bean, the national vegetable of the Hugarki, which grows year-round in cool and poor conditions and is also called the golden bean due to the new trade with Navuria. Last but not least, we must not forget the viku berries, which grow everywhere in the deep forests of the Hugarki Empire. Of course, other animals live in the realm of the Hugarki than in the realm of the Renan or Navurians, although some of the animal species of the steppe can also be found here. Nevertheless, the following animal species are characteristic of the ecosystem of the cold Hugarki rivers and forests. The musty salamander is one species in this region that lives on the muddy banks of the rivers between dense ajari bushes. A lizard that primarily eats river fish, but also smaller forest animals that come to the rivers to drink. More at home in the forests is the bark pig, an animal that feeds on the nutrient-rich tree bark and the insects it contains, which have found their home in large parts of the Hugarsian forests. The meat of these animals is often the main ingredient of Hugarsian cuisine, and some villages in the east have already domesticated some specimens. Water snappers don't pose a threat individually, as they feed mainly on fish in the rivers, but their territorial behavior makes their packs a dangerous adversary for loners lost in the woods. Of course, there are many other species in this area and in the many other realms in Raja, but the creatures and plants of this world deserve a separate mention in a special video on this topic. Cultural beliefs and religion. The ruling priesthood of the Hugarki maintains its power by passing on the teachings of the faith to the population only in dribs and drabs, presenting itself as the mouthpiece of the deity. To a certain extent, this may be even true, because only priests trained in kinetics with the so-called true vision can get in touch with the spirits of the world. However, only the fewest of them can endure more than a handful of wanderings into the truth. Therefore, the High Council of Wanderers, as the supreme authority of the realms calls itself, consists of experienced priests who have both often wandered in truth and still seem to be of reasonably clear mind. In truth, the priests behold the kinetic essence of all life in its raw, natural form, a view and a world not made and meant for the human mind, a world where kinetic energies manifest into consciousness and the world where gods dwell. The priests draw their knowledge from this world and try to interpret this kinetic world with means of life from the material world, in which they use bones, blood, and intestines to interpret what they see. Something that contributed significantly to their reputation as a savage, primitive people by the apparent madness. The Hugarki therefore considers all other peoples as blind and like to use the eyes as a symbol of their culture. They often draw a third eye in blue or green on their foreheads or shields in upcoming battles. Another representation of this belief is the wavy representation of truth, which they often symbolize with rivers. To repel evil energies from the kinetic world, many Hugarki wear evil-looking masks that are meant to keep the material world clean and are used for various purposes and customs. For example, there are masks that are supposed to strengthen courage, masks that increase fertility, and masks for everything in between. Recent history. Currently, 11 priests of truth rule the Hugarsian realm and are considered veterans of the wanderings, with over 100 wanderings together in the realm of truth. These priests were the ones who made a peace pact with the Moz, allowing trade routes to the Navurian Empire, something that gave a leap forward to the wealth and technological development of the empire. Unlike the past centuries, the Hugarki are now finally able to defend themselves with better weapons against the Gyari human raiders in the west, which led to relentless battles. But it was enough for the Gyari to realize that the Hugarki were now no longer easy prey. However, this situation is still critical from the Hugarki's point of view, as the Gyari are powerful and ruthless warriors about whom little or nothing is known. A similar experience must be made by the Renan in the east of the empire, who in recent centuries have steadily helped themselves to the resources of the villages bordering the steppe. However, the courageous resistance of the Hugarki meets with the approval of the Renan, who do not shy away from a fight and welcome it with open arms. And so the increased resistance is met with increasing brutality from the Renan. You will all find out how this situation develops in our manga at the latest. Let me know what you think of this video about the Hugarki and feel free to comment with your questions. Thanks a lot to all of you who support my project with Patreon. I'm really happy about that. I can't wait to produce more videos and present a first draft of the first manga chapter in the next months.